Industrial safety too has a history. Let us look on to the history of industrial safety. R.K. Pillai has prolonged experience of more than 50 years in safety engineering and a proven record of working in various industries like aircraft, foundry and forge, heavy chemicals, explosives, pulp and fiber and construction industries. His professional knowledge and approach is reflected in the pages to follow. Often he thinks of his early days of his career way back in 60s when safety was not so popular. There was nobody to help, nobody to seek advice from. The working conditions were entirely different. Safety engineering books were rare, unknown and not available even in technical libraries. There was nothing to refer to other than a copy of Factories Act 1948 and Factories Rules. It's all changed. Today, everything is available on a click of the mouse. His experience, knowledge and approach, if imparted, will be beneficial to the youngsters in the profession. This is only a beginning. He is watching the response, and if encouraging, we can expect more useful videos from him in the days to come. Let us go through the history of industrial safety. Have you ever thought about the beginning of industrial safety? No. Probably you have never even heard of it. But industrial safety too has a history. In the beginning, safety was only a survival need. Accidents were an integral part of daily life. Nobody knows when and where industrial safety was born. 100 years before, in 1920, accident was an integral part of community life. Today in 2020 also, we don't find any difference. I'm sure after another 100 years in 2120 also, accidents will continue to remain so. However, the progress in reducing the number of accidents and injuries in a relatively short period of 100 years from 1920 to 2020 has exceeded the highest expectations of the early safety pioneers. Let us have a peep through the history of industrial safety. For any living organism, safety awareness is inborn. In the beginning, man had to face hazards only from the nature. Livelihood of hunting and agriculture had limited hazards. Probably, animal instincts would have been the safety factor. Perhaps with the then existing knowledge, one could take precautions and save himself from possible harm. Accidents were considered natural, inevitable and at par with diseases. No one knows much about safety practice of medieval days. Whatever is told around is of someone's imagination. Medieval period is frequently caricatured as a time of ignorance and superstition. On those days, safety issues never existed, it's believed. Later, in the age of discovery, master craftsmen had to take utmost care to ensure safety of his apprentices and journeymen. Reason being, they were his kith and kin. It is reported that in Britain, mills existed in the 16th century. Safety was not a subject to any regulation. Accidents, different ones from those of hunting and agriculture, began to happen. New inventions helped mechanization. The Chief Inspector's report for 1936 quoted a report found concerning a fatal accident to a child in 1540. Her body was torn into pieces in a machine's wheel. Workhouses were established in 1576 to house poor. Industrial growth depended on good transportation systems to bring raw materials to factories and to distribute finished goods. Thus, they started building canals between mines and factories, then a road surface, and finally the railroad industry was developed. More and more inventions, expansions, advance in science and technology, and new methods of production followed. Cities were growing overnight. New inventions helped mechanization. In 1760, James Watt developed a steam engine which revolutionized transportation. Britain led the Industrial Revolution. Marketplaces developed into industrial cities. Though houses were poorly built, having no sanitation systems and drinking water. Thousands of people moved into these cities quickly. All this contributed to the spread of various diseases too. Factory conditions were worse with fumes, loud monotonous noise of machines and poor lighting. There was no safety devices provided on machines, even for emergencies. As marketplaces developed into industrial cities, people started losing person-to-person contact which they enjoyed before as farmers. They were forced to live in slums. No one bothered to discuss about safety of workers because they were poor. They were children of just 5 years or more. They were women. Their plight was worse than Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. Working in the factories of Industrial Revolution was hazardous. The factory workers faced safety hazards, health hazards, and cruel treatment. A factory from history. This was most modern then. If you were a child from a poor family at the beginning of the Victorian times, you worked and worked and worked. 12 to 16 hours of work, one day off on Sundays to go to church. What was wrong with the working conditions for children during the Victorian times? Children worked very long hours with little breaks and no fresh air. They often worked in very dangerous conditions, resulting in injuries or even death. Very young children were expected to work. There was no education for the poor, so it was very unlikely they could get better paid jobs when they were older. Children were paid very little because they were younger. Chimney sweeping was a job children could do better than adults. Small boys starting at the age of 5 or 6 years would be sent scrambling up inside the chimney to scrape and brush soot away. They came down covered in soot and with bleeding elbows and knees. The chimneys were usually very narrow, in some cases as small as 30 centimeters and twisted. Children often got stuck or froze with terror in the cramped darkness. In these cases, the master chimney sweeper would simply light the fire underneath to encourage them to get on with their work. This boy, aged 8, stated, "The work was dangerous and painful. Some boys got stuck and died of suffocation. I never got stuck myself, but some of my friends have and were taken out dead." This was what a girl aged 9 said. "I start work promptly at 5 in the morning and work all day till 9 at night. That's 16 hours. We're not allowed to talk, sit or look out of the window while we work. The only day off from work I get is on Sundays when we have to go to church." Young children working in a textile mill in dangerous conditions. Not a running race, but only for bread. Starved. Children steal cattle feed from neighboring cattle sheds. Refusal to work find their way to jail. Smiles long lost. 1844 Manchester, there were so many cripples that the inhabitants looked like an army just returned from a campaign. Why were children employed to work in factories? Children were much cheaper than adults as a factory owner and did not have to pay them as much. There were plenty of children in orphanages, so they could be replaced easily if accidents did occur. Children were small enough to crawl under machinery to tie up broken threads. Drovers. Drovers pulled heavy carts of cut coal to the pit surface with heavy chains around their waists. Below is a small sample of how children were killed working in coal mines. A trapper only 10 years old killed in an explosion. A horse driver aged 11 crushed by horse. A driver aged 14 fell off limbers and was crushed between the tubs and a door. A token keeper aged 14 crushed by surface wagons on branches. A screen boy aged 12 crushed by surface wagons. A trapper aged 12 crushed by tubs. Factories that sprang up after the Civil War, chemicals, dust, dangerous machines, and a confusing jumble of bells, pulleys, and gears confronted inexperienced, often very young workers. Britain led the Industrial Revolution. As a result, they used their capital to invest in textiles, mines, railroads, and shipbuilding. Many inventions, expansions, advances in science and technology, revolution in transportation, and new methods of production geared the revolution. And when you ask who were the people who worked for the factories, writers answer you: men, women, and children aged 5 and above. Accidents were cheap. While workers injured on the job or their heirs might sue employers for damages, winning proved difficult. Where employers could show that the workers had assumed the risk or had been injured by the actions of a fellow employee or had himself been partly at fault, courts would usually deny liability. The Industrial Revolution. Common law favored the owners and managers, and there was no compensation for occupational injuries or illness. Servant rule, contributory negligence, assumption of risk. The common law. The employee contributed to the cause of the accident. Another employee contributed to the cause of the accident. The employee knew of the hazard involved in the accident before the injury was sustained and still agreed to work in the condition of pain. There was no employer negligence. Here you shall witness in the years to come the rise of the labor union to get more gains for workers in wages or productivity in a safer and healthier environment. Governments now realize the demands of workers are justifiable. Result: First Workmen's Compensation Act. The Factory and Workshop Act 1878 extended earlier codes to cover all trades. The minimum working age was raised to 10 years. Significant amendments to the Factories Act in 1937 and 1961 brought things closer to modern-day standards. Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 made a leap forward with the changed goal-based regulations supported by guidance and codes of practice. Employers become interested in safety. The sharp rise in accident costs that resulted from competition laws and tighter employers' liability initiated the modern concern with work safety and initiated the long-term decline in work accidents and injuries. Large firms in railroading, mining, manufacturing, and elsewhere suddenly became interested in safety. Companies began to guard machines and power sources while machinery makers developed safer designs. No industrial system existed in the US before 19th century. Families usually lived and worked in farms. After 1800, effects of Industrial Revolution were felt in the United States too. Factory work started. Because accidents were so cheap, American industrial methods developed with little reference to their safety. US factories were far superior in terms of production to the preceding small handcraft shops and inferior in terms of human values, health, and safety. In large industrial centers, the ugly results of industrial accidents and poor health conditions became more and more obvious. Voices of protest were raised. From 1898 on, there were various efforts to make the employers liable for accidents. In 1908, First Workmen's Compensation Act was passed in New York. Supreme Court declared this unconstitutional. Later in 1911, when Wilkinson passed the Workmen's Compensation Act, US Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional. Regardless of fault of person's management would pay compensation for work injury. Legislation had become gradually more rigorous. Legislation forced employers to pay for on-the-job injuries. Wiser employers found profitable to prevent accidents than paying compensation. Managers began to look for hidden dangers at work and to require that workers wear hard hats and safety glasses. They also set up safety departments run by engineers and safety committees that included both workers and managers. In the first decade of 20th century, two great industries, railroads and steel, organized safety programs in large scale. In 1913, companies founded the National Safety Council to pool information. Government agencies such as the Bureau of Mines and National Bureau of Standards provided scientific support, while universities also researched safety problems for firms and industries. People realized the employer owes more than just the wages to his workers. It's his duty to take care of their moral and physical conditions, and this purely moral obligation, which cannot be replaced by any kind of wages, should take precedence over consideration of private interest. However, even today, business has only one goal: profit. In industry, there is no humanitarian consideration. Then why safety? Answer: for statutes. Why statutes? Workers have no protection. Hating industry. Mad hater. A large number of workers working in unsafe environments. Workplace injuries and illness increasing. Its impact was felt in the society. Government realized need for worker protection. Employers fought regulations. Injury and fatality statistics prompted government to act. State programs were not consistent. Industrial law was developed along four main lines: reporting, prohibition, regulation, compensation or insurance. Factories Act, OSHA. All four are interrelated and depends upon each other for success. Reporting of accidents and ill health are purposeless unless it leads to prohibition or regulation of sources of accidents and dangers, and incomplete if not made a part of proper system of compensation administration. Efforts for prohibition and regulation groups in the dark without the light of experience made available through reporting of accidents, and is apt to be feeble unless stimulated by cooperative financial pressure exerted by compensation. Over a period, statutes on safety are made stringent through accidents continue to happen. But why? Industries developed some experience in safety. It discovered that engineering could prevent some accidents. Employers could be reached through education. Safety rules could be established and enforced. Thus, the 3 E's of safety: engineering, education, and enforcement were developed. So, there never existed one essential element, that is, enthusiasm. Father of modern industrial safety, H.W. Heinrich published Industrial Accident Prevention in 1931. Postulated the concept that the actions of people cause far more accidents than hazardous conditions. We could develop new safety techniques, pass stringent statutes, adopt new safety theories, improve physical conditions, reduce manual labor, adopt automation, employ every imaginable measures, and still accidents continue to happen. But why? With all those conceivable safety measures, there is no way to completely eliminate accidents. No two men are alike within. Their environment will differ. Their actions will differ too. They will continue to cause accidents. Nature is not totally predictable. Man has no absolute control over nature yet. Nature will continue to play havoc. Natural calamities cannot be totally eliminated. All men are not gentlemen. Society cannot totally eliminate criminals. Criminal offenses cannot be totally eliminated. We are improving. We are now capable of predicting natural calamities and take possible precautions to save men and materials to a certain extent. We are now capable of policing over criminal activities and protect citizens to a certain extent. We are now capable of safeguarding against accidents and save men and materials also to a certain extent only. Accidents will continue to remain an integral part of human life forever. R.K. Pillai, Kollam, and early OSHA trainer from Georgia Tech Institute, presenting his study on the history of industrial safety. If newcomers to the profession are benefited with this, he will be glad to hear. Even your criticism is welcome. Let us have it. Thank you for your time in watching.